I think over time, I've seen the shift from it's all conversations to, more of the self-service. But I don't think the value of those conversations that clients have with the analysts where they can really pick their brain, dig into a topic, tell them what they're working on and get their view on it. That I think never goes away, but it changes to even more relevancy and even a deeper conversation.
Welcome to TBR Talks, decoding strategies and ecosystems of the globe's top tech firms, where we talk business model disruption in the broad technology ecosystem, from management consultancies to systems integrators, hyperscalers to independent software vendors, telecom operators to network and infrastructure vendors, and chip manufacturers to value-added resellers. We'll be answering some key intelligence questions we've heard from executives and business unit leaders among the leading professional services, IT, and telecom vendors. I'm Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst, and today we'll be talking about trends in IT services and the technology business overall with Lindy Hanson, who has held many roles during her tenure at TBR, from research analyst through practice director to her current role as Vice President of Customer Engagement. So Lindy, you've been looking at the technology space from TBR's business lens for a couple decades now. So you've seen both hype cycles, but you've also seen those long trends that really change the industry and change how we look at it. So I'm curious, when you look at what's happening now, are there some things that have been hype cycles that have turned into long trends? Do you see that happening now, or what do you see in terms of the long view of technology over the last few years and where we're headed?
I think when you first posed that question to me, I think there were a couple of things that I thought about, and going back to IT services and the whole shift to offshoring, nearshoring, labor arbitrage, do more with lower cost people. And that was, at the time, it was so disruptive to the vendors.
Right.
I think the vendors initially saw it as a way that, okay, we're gonna cut our costs, we're gonna do this more efficiently. All of a sudden, customers were thinking, okay, well, we would like some of this cost savings too.
Right.
And it was very disruptive in terms of how people were looking at what rates should we be charging? What's the mix that we should use onshore versus offshore? How do we stand up these centers across the globe? And I think that's one that is absolutely stuck around, but and I think it did transform companies and how they deliver, but it also didn't fundamentally change the business of IT services.
Right. It's still people. It still has to be people delivering IT services. And it's funny because it was about that shift was about the cost cutting. And we've seen that same sort of emphasis on cost cutting with things like generative AI and with things like automation analytics overall. And again, companies saying we're going to apply this to our delivery and therefore save you some cost. And the client saying, well, we'd like to see some of that, please.
Right. And I think with labor arbitrage and offshoring, it was these huge mountains of benefit that everyone expected.
Right.
And then it started to settle in what you saw in reality was these offshore teams weren't as efficient.
Right.
Maybe they were a third of the billing rate, but it might take them twice as long.
Right.
And there was a lot of, I think, schooling up on what does that business model really look like.
Right. And it keeps changing. It keeps getting refined again and again. But fundamentally, it comes back to people delivering a service. And your role here has shifted in the last few years. You're working a lot more with clients now directly. And I'm curious, when you talk to clients, how much you've seen a change in the questions that they're asking us. And maybe one or two of the questions that are sort of either the most persistent questions that are hard to answer or the ones that keep coming up again and again that we sort of love going after.
Yeah, I think the questions have stayed in the same type of questions, but I think the reality of how deep someone wants to go in those questions, I think the expectations are higher in terms of what we know, what we can tell them, what they want answered in terms of, if we're doing a custom project versus, vendor-based research. But, there are a lot more sources and a lot more ways to get information. So I think we see vendors have definitely gotten smarter over the years. So the questions have been deeper and more complex, but they're still on the same topics, I think.
Right.
How do we make money? How are my competitors making money? How are they delivering it? Like really still pricing, operational benchmarking,
Right.
Really, those type of questions are still pretty, I think, relevant.
Well, that sort of reinforces your point that the basics of IT services and tech it hasn't really changed. So those questions are persistent because the business model hasn't shifted dramatically. I am curious if there are certain questions that you think our clients should be asking that we're not hearing enough. Is there anything that, and I mean that in the way of like one client comes in with a question like that's just brilliant, and why aren't others asking that? Have you had that happen at all?
That's a good question. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I definitely sometimes expect folks to want to drill in deeper
Mm,
on whether it's a operational model or, breaking down how someone's going to market, SG&A,
yeah,
how are they
yeah,
putting together the secret sauce of
yeah,
how
and
you
it's
sell, how you deliver.
how you sell, how you deliver, just those basic fundamental questions. I guess they don't go away. Why would they? So then my sort of last questions around how we do what we do and where you think research is going to be. So if the business models haven't changed that much, if the fundamental questions that we're being asked haven't changed that much, are we still doing the same thing in 10 years, or what is research like the research we do going to look like 10 years from now?
I think it's a lot like going back to the first question we were talking about. The expectations are changing about how you serve up information, how you deliver information to clients and to folks. We need to be able to customize it. We need it digital. We need for customers to be able to self-serve in terms of making, pulling out what's relevant. We deliver a lot of information. We deliver very detailed reports, but you could have a 60 to 70 page report, slide deck, but it's only those pieces that may be relevant to someone in a certain role, whether you're sales
Yeah,
enablement, whether you're
yeah.
strategy. So, and that's what, not to, plug what we're working on, but, we're rolling out Insight Center.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's in response to what we hear from folks, like need to be able to customize this and make this mine and contextualize it to my business. So I need to go in, and your charts and your report are great, but I need to go make that what, the vendors I need to look at, the KPIs and metrics I need to see.
Right.
So that's what we're doing with a lot of the work in Insight Center is making you to be able to make your own version of our research and our reports, and that can get served out to your deliverables. And
I think one thing I like about Insight Centers, I think it strikes that balance because our reports, they're relentless, they're massive, there's so much information that's there, and you want to have all that information. You want it to be relentless because the companies we cover they're doing business every day, they're changing every day. We've got to keep on top of it. But you're right, what gets delivered in a report, only a sliver of it or only a chunk of it gets used by any one individual client. So if we can strike that balance between putting all the information out there consistently and relentlessly and letting the clients pick and choose what exactly they need to use, which is essentially what Insight Center is going to do.
yeah. And then I think the other piece that never goes away is the importance of the conversations and the talking to people.
Right.
I think over time, I've seen the shift from it's all conversations to, more of the self-service, but I don't think the value of those conversations that clients have with the analysts where they can really pick their brain, dig into a topic, tell them what they're working on and get their view on it. That I think never goes away, but it changes to even more relevancy and even a deeper conversation.
Right. Right. And that gets at what you've been saying, that's what clients keep asking for, is that next level of depth, that important context and relevancy. So excellent. Thank you very much. Maybe we'll have this conversation in a couple of months and talk about Insight Center in more detail and how it's getting used by our clients.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Fantastic. Thank you. Next month, I'll be speaking with Lindy again to talk about how clients are using Insight Center. Tune in next week for a discussion with Peter Zames on how TBR has evolved along with our clients. Don't forget to send us your key intelligence questions on business strategy, ecosystems, and management through the form in the show notes below. Visit tbri.com to learn how we help tech companies large and small answer these questions with the research, data, and analysis my guests bring to this conversation every week. Once again, I'm your host, Patrick Heffernan, Principal Analyst at TBR. Thanks for joining us, and see you next week.